Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Nuckolls. I am one of the co-founders of Pumpjack Power. We are the first and only power provider in North America designed exclusively to power the oil and gas industry. In 2019, my phone began to ring off the hook of data miners trying to go plug into West Texas. At that time, I went to our credit facility that allows us to buy and supply power to our consumers, and I said, hey, there's a $1 billion industry coming to Texas, and we need to create a solution that can power this industry. At that time, our credit facility kind of laughed at us and said, this industry is going to go boom and bust. We don't believe in it. A year and a half later, they called us back and said, Nuckolls, you were right and we were wrong. And so recently, we just launched Crypto Power. Crypto Power is the first and only power provider in North America designed to exclusively power the blockchain. What I wanted to talk about today was how you go from permit to power flow within the most innovative power system in the world, the ERCOT power market. I firmly believe over the course of the next 10 to 12 years, we are fixing to witness the greatest creation of wealth mankind has ever seen. In 1999, there was 140 million users on the internet. Fast forward 23 years later, there's close to 4 billion internet users today in the world. If you use a tenth of those same growth projections, Bitcoin is about to go absolutely parabolic in that time frame that I just told you. So I have a very simple question for everyone here. Who wants to really know what it takes to scale a mining operation from a few megawatts into a few thousand megawatts within the most innovative power system in the world? Well, you came to the right talk. Today, I'm going to talk about 4 simple things that involves the from permit to power flow process. First is strategic land sourcing. Second is the connection process. Third, the wholesale power market and what that means. And lastly, power portfolio optimization. So let's start with the first step, strategic land sourcing. ERCOT itself is an energy island separated from the rest of the ISOs, the interconnects of the United States. Within the ERCOT grid system, you have regulated and deregulated areas of competition. In regulated markets, these markets are controlled by co-ops. You have no choice of competitive energy. You're basically stuck with their terms and their one-sided service. When you try to call them when something's wrong, good luck, right? I would highly advise against operating in a co-op environment because you don't have those competitive costs of energy and the service is not the true turnkey service you should be getting. In a deregulated market, you have a competitive choice of what power provider you can buy energy from. Because you open up competition in a deregulated market, it drives power providers to provide you the most cost-effective energy in the marketplace. So when you're out trying to find, hey, where can I go develop a Bitcoin mine? Your first step that you should start with is this area a deregulated market? So kind of down there on the bottom right, you can kind of see the ERCOT market. The ERCOT market is divided into 4 grid zones. You have West, North, Houston, and the South grid zone. The best place to mine Bitcoin in the entire world is West Texas. The reason why West Texas is the greatest place to mine Bitcoin is because we have such a large energy base in Texas with so many different types of energy resources, where Texas is the industry leader in energy output. In West Texas, there is such a concentration of generation assets that you cannot get power out to high demand areas like Dallas or Houston. And so there's just a massive congestion problem in West Texas. The Bitcoin industry presents a massive solution. We can strategically place assets in areas of high congestion with the grid, alleviate that congestion, and allow electrons to flow more freely through the grid. So when you hear about, the greatness that Bitcoin mining is doing for the grid, it is stabilizing the grid because it is alleviating congestion off of the grid and allowing electrons to flow more freely. So when you're really looking at where do I go set up shop, first you got to be in a deregulated area, but then you really have to analyze the certain types of grid zones within the ERCOT market. And again, West Texas is absolutely the greatest place to mine Bitcoin because we have such a generational demand and not enough transmission capacity to get out. And so Bitcoin is that solution. So let's say you have a place out in West Texas, right? Let's say you have a ranch out in West Texas, and I want to go mine Bitcoin here. The first step of once you have that piece of dirt is you need to look around of what high voltage transmission lines are servicing this area, right? If you're standing out in a field in West Texas and you can't see a power line with an eyesight, you're not in a good area to mine Bitcoin. If you're standing next to a 345 kV line, right, and you see a bunch of distribution lines around it with maybe a substation too where you can get some first phased access, you are hunting in a good market where you can go get the capacity that you need to. So high voltage transmission is incredibly important when selecting a site for infrastructure access. Thirdly, I see a lot of miners, you start with 5, 10 megawatts, kind of a phase one approach. A lot of times I see miners outgrow their locations, right? If you want to go do a 100 megawatt project, you're going to need anywhere from 20 to 30 acres of land to go do that. While there is a lot of land in West Texas for you to go do that, a lot of times people will partner with landowners that don't have enough contiguous land acreage to really grow their means. And so once you select a site and hey, this site has high voltage transmission capacity with some power availability, what does the land picture really look like? Can you expand off of this land site? So that's something that you really need to keep in mind of what kind of a phased out approach and how much can I really grow to at this one spot. Approved zoning. This has become a huge issue. Guys, the days of running around like a rabid dog chasing 10, 20 megawatts of a public substation are over. Completely over. There are cities that have basically said, hey, no more Bitcoin mining in our city. Abilene, San Angelo, several West Texas cities have started to do this. And so not only finding the infrastructure access, finding a good piece of dirt, you need to be in an area that is approved for Bitcoin mining. So that's a big step that a lot of people are starting to look over. Lastly, access to industry is incredibly important. If you are, let's keep using the West Texas example, if you're in Abilene or if you're in Midland, right, you're going to have access to industry, human labor, resources. If you're mining way out in Mentone or way out in Pecos or Orla, God forbid, the access to industry that you're going to have is greatly impacted. And that is really going to affect your economics of having to take machines out, human labor, workforce. It is a huge headache. So at the end of the day, you need to be in an area that can support not only a huge operation, but you have to have the human labor to go do it. So to quickly summarize on strategic land sourcing, you want to be in a deregulated area. You've got to have high voltage capacity, contiguous land development so your site can grow, approved zoning. If you're in a rural area, lucky you don't have to deal with zoning. And lastly, access to industry. So once you kind of have all of those in motion and okay, I've got my spot, I've got the capacity, I've got the access to human labor, and I've got the land. The next process is the connection process. The connection process is a process that you will go through with the transmission provider. So the power provider's job is to supply you electricity. And as a power provider, we have supply and service agreements with every transmission utility in Texas. So it's our job to be your service agent to get your capacity installed. So let's say you guys want to go do a 100 megawatt project in West Texas. The first step of the connection process is you basically want to create a roadmap of what you're really going to scale to, and you want to submit that to the utility, right? If you're only going to start off with 25 megawatts and it's your goal to get to 100, let's say in 36 months, you want to build out a forecasted map that shows that true usage. Once you submit that to your power provider, the power provider is then going to submit a load study with that information to the transmission provider. The transmission provider is then going to take it to a load design review based off the information that you gave, okay? Once you submit that load study, they're going to put it into design, right? They're going to come back and say, hey, here's the design of this capacity that you are requesting. Let's say it's 100 megawatts. Not only with that design, they're going to come back and give you a cost to serve that request. So what will happen is they're going to come back and say, okay, hey, we have this capacity for you to pull off this high voltage line or a substation. Here's the cost and timeline associated with that. So always remember, you have transmission, and then you have supply. The supply comes from your power provider. The transmission comes from the transmission provider. Okay, so there's two sets of cost. The cost that we're currently talking about is the cost to build your infrastructure with the transmission utility. So they're going to come back with two things. They're going to come back with the cost, and let's say, to go develop 100 megawatts, it's going to be $1 million. With that cost estimate, they're going to give you what's called an FEA, a Facilities Extension Agreement. With that Facilities Extension Agreement, that is essentially a binding agreement that says you are credit worthy, you're going to pay this $1 million, and authorize us to begin that process. So once you sign that FEA and you pay your costs to the transmission utility, your power provider then goes to work with the transmission provider to create that capacity. Once you pay that capacity and sign your FEA, then it gets released to engineering of physically, hey, what type of work do we have to do on the transmission side to create this and support it? Once that's completed, it gets released to construction. And it's your power provider's job to simply keep you updated on timeline completions and whatnot. The biggest thing I can tell this room about the connection process, right now in the ERCOT system, there's close to 30 gigawatts of load sheet submissions. These transmission utilities have put up a big X to the data mining industry because this industry, a lot of these power providers have just oversubmitted, drowned these transmission utilities, and there's also a lot of people just trying to kick tires of seeing, oh, where's the load available, and actually not using it. So from a transmission standpoint, the utilities have gotten a little agitated with this industry because of the oversubmissions. So that is why it's incredibly important to work with a power provider who truly knows how to develop a roadmap for you and get you those streamlined services. So always, never want to overpromise and underdeliver, underpromise and overdeliver, 100%. The next thing I want to talk about, let's say after you're connected, the connection process has gone through, your site's connected, your infrastructure is built out, now you are physically ready to flow power at your site. But hey, you have to buy power to get energy, right? The biggest thing that I see the data mining industry be subjected to is just simple overpromotion, right? There are mainly two types of power providers in the ERCOT market. There's an option one and there's an option two. An option one power provider is licensed to sell to the masses. There's close to 30 million consumers in the ERCOT market. And so those mass market power providers like TXU, Reliant, Champion, Gexa, their whole focus is how many of those 30 million consumers can I get in the door? There is close to 500 energy brokers registered in the state of Texas. These energy brokers essentially are used to simply save back office time, headache, and worries from these big power providers, right? I've seen energy brokers charge anywhere from $1 to $5 per megawatt, and I've seen option one power providers charge anywhere from $7 to $10 per megawatt. So you could have anywhere from $10 to $15 of extra margin on your power costs buying through an aggregator. When you buy direct, you are truly getting the most direct, cost-efficient energy possible. The other type of power provider is an option two power provider. An option two power provider is licensed to sell to one type of identified consumer, which is what Pumpjack Power and Crypto Power is. Other types of option two power providers, Chevron, Energy Transfer, Oxy, all these multi-billion-dollar energy companies, they don't go to an energy broker. They don't call me when they need energy. They're their own power provider. They go direct into the wholesale power market, and they buy energy at cost. And so the data mining industry needs to be doing the same thing. You need to have a solution where you can buy direct energy at cost and not be over-promoted. So when you're ready to buy energy, what are the three markets that you can buy energy in? Well, the first market is the forward market, okay? The forward market is simply the forward strip of power prices. Electricity is computed by two things. natural gas prices, and the secondly is heat rate. A heat rate is a simple general assumption of the weather factors going on in the world. The worst time in the market to buy energy is right now during the middle of summer, right? We have more demand, more peak demand. Heat rates are very high because we're in the middle of a heat wave. The best time to buy energy is the shoulder season months. February, March, April, October, November, right? It's not as hot outside. You don't necessarily have the cold generation front. And so those shoulder seasons are really the best time to buy energy. In terms of the forward market, we're obviously in a very tough natural gas climate right now. If you tried to go buy energy in the spot market, it would be tough in this summer. Once you start to get in the middle of 2023, later part of 2023, early part of 2024, power prices are already back sub 4 cents. So what we tell our customers at Crypto Power is, hey, there are ways to navigate the short term to get out of this extreme volatility and into a more smooth forward market, 100%. So when you're in the forward market, what you're doing is you are buying a fixed block of energy, right? That's budget certainty. There are two types of power products that you can buy. A fixed block of energy, budget certainty, that's the easiest way to say it. The other type is what we call a variable product, an index product. An index product is essentially derived from the real-time market. Everyone should take a second here in a bit to download the ERCOT app on their cell phone. The ERCOT app will tell you current market demands of how our grid system is doing, but it will show you what the wholesale real-time power prices are in the 4 grid zones. So this morning I was just talking to a gentleman about this, and West Texas, the West Zone, which is kind of all over here, it was negative energy pricing. How do you have negative energy pricing? When you have such a concentrated generational asset in a certain zone and you can't get it out to other markets, that's when you see negative energy pricing. So you have, while the index product is a little bit more risky because obviously you can see some upside with it, there are numerous times throughout the course of a day where you Bitcoin miners are effectively paid free electricity to mine Bitcoin. And you do that with index pricing in the real-time energy market. The last type of market that you can buy power in is what's called the day-ahead market. What that means is essentially you buy power today on a certain hedge against tomorrow. So if you think tomorrow the energy markets are going to blow out and I feel comfortable with today's price, you can buy and sell and even trade energy in the day-ahead market. I don't necessarily advise to that on a mass scale, but it is a good way to alleviate some short-term hedging risk and some volatility. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing to understand about the wholesale market in Texas is it's a nodal market. All these little black dots that you see on the screen are generation plants, right? When you buy power, you can either buy power to the hub, which means all of these resource nodes are basically collected into a central hub. West Hub is a very famous hub that you can buy energy from. So you can buy it from the hub, and then how you factor in your transmission fees, your load zone, you can pass them through, you can fix them. There are very creative ways that you can minimize cost liabilities by simply structuring your energy contract the right way. The biggest thing I can also say is the money that is made on the ERCOT's consumer due to misinformation is in the billions. A huge thing right now, Winter Storm Uri drastically changed our landscape in Texas. A lot of Bitcoin miners made millions and millions and millions of dollars within a 72-hour period. Right now in the market, there is ongoing litigation because these power providers withheld this millions of dollars and did not distribute that money back to the consumers. So partnering with a power provider who really truly has your best interests at heart and is a reciprocal energy partner, that is a huge issue, a massive issue. The last thing I want to chat about is power portfolio management. Before you can even get electricity, you have to have infrastructure to your site. We have a sister company called Power Infrastructure Partners. Power Infrastructure Partners is an EPC company that builds and operates electrical infrastructure for our oil and gas and crypto clients. Before you even go out to a site, you need to have a team that can absolutely do all of these four things. If you do not have a team in place to manage your electrical infrastructure, when something goes down, a breaker goes bad, an inverter is blown out, it is a huge time constraint to go source someone to fix this, to go get the parts. Partnering with someone who can give you a streamlined operation and solution is the utmost importance, because in this industry, we all know downtime is lost revenue. And keeping that 98, 99% runtime is the utmost importance. And you do that by truly optimizing your infrastructure and having a team in place to manage that for you. Lastly, on the supply side, the ongoing flow of electricity, it's obviously the biggest OpEx in this industry. If you do not have a direct relation with your power provider and you're not actively managing your fees, you're going to just see more exorbitant buildup of fees, congestion charges going through the roof. And so how you physically manage the day-to-day supply of your electricity is the utmost importance, because it truly is going to save you a lot of OpEx cost and a lot of headache. A big thing also with the supply is demand response. So whoever doesn't know what demand response is, I'm going to give you a quick rundown. In the ERCOT market, they created a program called demand response. It is essentially a curtailment program that says, hey, during peak hours, when we're hitting peak times and we need excess energy, you are selling the energy that you have allowed into this program into this market. There's two types of payments in demand response. There's a capacity payment. So simply every month, ERCOT is going to pay you for whatever amount of megawatts you put into this program, right? It averages anywhere from $100,000 to $115,000 a megawatt per year. The other payment is the market payment. The market payment is essentially the payment once you're curtailed and you're selling back into the market, right? So, let's say if you would have had 100 megawatts online during Winter Storm Uri, you would have probably cleared in a 72-hour period in excess of probably close to about $150, maybe $175 million in 3 days. Going back to what I was saying earlier, partnering with a power provider who's truly going to keep your interests aligned and reciprocate those funds is the utmost importance. There are miners out almost $1 billion because they still have not gotten their demand response money from the storm. So truly working with a good demand response firm who has your interest at heart and is going to be a true reciprocal partner is the utmost importance. But in my personal opinion, where I think the industry is going, and I think the PUCT is fixing to kind of come down and say every Bitcoin mining facility on grid in Texas is going to have to be demand response. But the thing about it is demand response is an extra revenue stream in your business, and it's a huge thing. Distributed generation, we're starting to see some Bitcoin mines install batteries at their facilities. What this is essentially doing is they're storing electricity, right, during peak times, and they're either operating off of that battery when they're shut off, or they are using that electricity to sell back into the market. So outside of creating an additional revenue stream through demand response, distributed generation is something that is really going to start coming into play more and more into this industry. Lastly, there are companies out there that, hey, we want to go straight green energy. That's totally fine. I personally believe in energy efficiency, right? I believe in a robust generational asset, wind, solar, natural gas, more dispatchable resources over intermittent resources. But if you truly believe, hey, I want to get more green into my portfolio, buy renewable energy credits. It's going to save you a lot of money, and it's also going to incentivize more renewable generation to be built out. So in closing, how you manage your ongoing asset at your data facility is the utmost important. Infrastructure and supply. At the end of the day, those are the two things that you have to power your facility, and how you manage that asset is going to save you a lot of time and money and headache. And so in closing, If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask me. I appreciate the time. And I'm Ryan Nuckolls with Crypto Power.
Any questions here for Ryan? Right in the back here.
Excellent presentation. So I just have a quick question on, if you go back 2 slides.
Yep.
So it's related to the power generation in West Texas, right? You talked about how there was a congestion of power. What's preventing them from getting it to Dallas, right? What's preventing that? And then the second question I had was, well, I'll wait for you to answer that one.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So think of high voltage transmission lines, like the 345 massive transmission lines that you see. Those are essentially highways. Those are electricity highways, okay? There is not enough high voltage transmission coming out of West Texas into high demand zones such as Austin, Dallas, Houston, right? There are ongoing projects to increase transmission, but the problem is the demand. Texas is one of the probably only power markets in the United States where our demand is growing. The rest of the United States is very flat, okay? Because we have ongoing demand and keep adding, we cannot simply build transmission fast enough to alleviate this issue. And so where the Bitcoin mining industry makes the biggest impact is what I said earlier. Strategically placing assets to alleviate congestion off the grid is not only going to help stabilize the grid and get you the cheapest price of power, but is going to allow those electrons to flow more freely through those transmission lines to get to those high demand areas. So while we need to keep building transmission lines, we also need to keep strategically placing Bitcoin mining assets to alleviate that congestion to help stabilize and power our grid.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. And my last question was, it's in regards to, you talked about a lot of communities kind of Xing the power, right? Stopping, you know, and you said there was 30 gigawatts of, you know, basically proposals, right? So why are they stopping if there's such a large amount of proposals, right? Yes, there's a lot of tire kickers, but why stop? You know, is it just that demand on that area that they can't sustain, or what is that? What's the reason for it?
In terms of kind of city-based mining, as I will say, right? I'm going to use Abilene as an example. The city of Abilene only has so much substations built out, right? They have only so many distribution systems built out. Bitcoin mining, while it is awesome of stabilizing the grid, there's a really endless amount of energy that Bitcoin miners can consume. And so what they've really done, some cities have just kind of run scared, in my opinion, of just being fearful of, oh, the Bitcoin miners are going to suck up all the power out of the grid and maybe, hey, don't do this. I think they'll eventually come around to realizing, hey, this is actually a good thing. But I think for right now, it's really just kind of a preventative measure. They haven't just said, hey, you're not allowed to mine within our greater territory, but certain infrastructure points, they are simply dedicating to residential consumers. Does that make sense?
Thanks, Ryan. Any other questions for Ryan?
Thanks for the time, everybody.
Thank you, Ryan.